Yeah, I mean, I think you have to see a book and a film as different things. And, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, when I'm writing a book, I mean, Danny Boyle and John Hodge have to stand over my shoulder watching every chapter that I'm doing. So you have to see the, you know, the two very different mediums, and the process of adaptation is can be quite an involved and complicated thing. So really, if you're the writer of the book, you have to really be there in a supportive capacity and to kind of encourage them. And you can't really, I mean, there's a lot of nonsense talk about being true to a book. I think you have to really dive in and rip a book up and really find the essence of the story. Because, I mean, if I was pitching Trainspotting as a book, for example, I would go to a publishers and say, well, it's about the kind of changes in society and the collapse of work and the growth of drug culture, and these kind of young guys and they find themselves kind of right in the middle of that and trying to make sense of that emerging world. If I was pitching it as a movie, I would say it's Renton trying to get off heroin. So you have to be very succinct as a movie. You have to tell one story, and you have to identify what that real story is, and really streamline things down, and you know, and tell the tale cinematically, tell it in pictures.
One of the things that I thought was interesting is that the book is much grittier, streetwise, realistic, hard realism. And yet there's this surreal element that comes into the film. And I read a quote from Boyle where he said he was trying to take some of the otherworldliness of Acid House and mix it with the street grit of Trainspotting.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of, he did want to almost make it a stylistic fusion of the two. You know, he wanted to kind of, I mean, one of the things we were determined to do is, I mean, all the drug films that I've seen I really didn't like. I mean, you know, there's some really very worldly films like Christian F. I quite like Gus Van Sant's Drugstore Cowboy, but we were determined we didn't want to see the characters as victims. You know, we determined it was a kind of movie about youth culture and about the kind of the joys and irresponsibilities of being young and being in a gang and being in a team of people who, you know, they've taken a bad turn in life and they've gone into this kind of sort of really kind of sort of dangerous and bad place. But it's basically about the joy of being young. And I think we wanted to kind of we wanted to keep that that kind of spirit really, and you know that was an important thing for us to do.
The, you know, we sort of obliquely reference it, but, you know, of course, the toilet bowl thing, right? You gotta bring that up. I mean, it's in the book. There's a sense of, you know, this character will go to any lengths to, you know, to continue this lifestyle that he's chosen for himself. And at the same time, the movie sort of took this extra leap with that leap into surrealism. Were you kind of aware that this is how they were going to take this scene, that it was going to become this kind of iconic scene in the movie? It occurs very early in the movie and in the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, you know, as you know, they don't shoot movies in sequence, and when we were shooting these scenes, it was, we're in this old deserted tobacco factory in the north side of Glasgow. That's where we built the set. And they had kind of constructed this giant tank, basically for Ewan McGregor to swim in. And I'd seen the script, but it didn't really kind of strike home until, you know, I saw this big tank, and I thought, what are you guys going to do with this? They said, well, this is a toilet, basically. So I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. But yeah, it was a fantastic scene, and you know, it's like I think these fantastical kind of touches. I mean, obviously, heroin isn't a psychoactive drug. You know, it's not like acid or mushrooms. You're not kind of sort of tripping. But you know, when people are taking all sorts of concoctions of drugs, you know, like a lot of people take speed and take cocaine to deal with heroin. So you're staying up all night. Their sleep patterns are irregular, and when you kind of when you're staying up all night on speed, you start to hallucinate in a much more powerful and profound and ugly way than you do with acid. So I think these kind of scenes, I think really worked well in the context of the movie. And we also live in a much more psychoactive society now, you know, with the way commercials and all that are kind of constructed, that we live in a very trippy world, basically.
That scene would not have been the same with CGI, would it? They had to put him in the tank.
I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, they had to put him in the tank. I mean, there's a lot of scenes there that kind of, that strangely actually hold up well. I mean, it's like, even the baby on the ceiling, you can tell it's a mechanical thing that's going along the ceiling, but somehow in a bizarre way, it actually works better than a real kind of CGI thing, because you would just, you know, I mean, you know it's a mechanical thing that's being pulled along, basically, but it adds to the kind of ghostly kind of creepiness of it. If it was CGI that looked really kind of slick, you would still know that it's not a real baby on the ceiling, you know, so that you know, it kind of, I'm always surprised at how well that scene holds up. I was over in Scotland and we kind of, we went to this, the big, they've got this big kind of sort of film village in Govan and Glasgow, and we were sitting there in the cafe having a cup of tea, and suddenly somebody just dumps the baby on the table, you know, the electronic baby, and I thought, fuck me, I've still got this thing here.
I gotta say that the thing that pulled me in, because I was familiar with the book, but I was, you know, I'm so let down so often by movies that, you know, intent to interpret books, that I'm skeptical about going to see them. And what pulled me in to go see Trainspotting in the theater was the soundtrack. I'd heard the songs that were on the soundtrack. I go, if the soundtrack is as cool as, you know, More Slippy or something like that, or Iggy Pop, or, you know, these amazing artists, how did that, it definitely had an enhancing effect on the world that you were painting in the book. Obviously you can't have a soundtrack for the novel, but is this a soundtrack that you could have imagined in your mind for the book if you had been able to do one?
Yeah, I mean, hello? Yeah. The soundtrack was kind of, it was a kind of, I mean, obviously you want something, you want music that's going to sort of say something about the times and say something about the beats of the individual scenes. It was a kind of sort of horrible accident in a way, because we didn't have money. So, I mean, one of the big costs of movies, independent movies, is licensing soundtracks. And we didn't have the money to license anything. Really. It's like it was shot for 1.5, well, not even 1.5, but 1.3 million, which is kind of roughly about sort of $2 million, basically. I mean, the budget for the party in Cannes was bigger than the budget for the film. So we kind of, we didn't really, you know, we didn't really know sort of how we were going to get soundtracks, and basically we just got musicians in that were friends. You know, basically we kind of, Danny was friends with Left Field because he worked with them in Shallow Grave, and I mean, I kind of knew Primal Scream and New Order, and we just, you know, and we kind of got the musicians basically in and showed them, you know, some of the kind of rushes and all that, and we said, this is a great, you know, I mean, I knew Jarvis Cocker and David Albarn and all that as well, so we just, you know, so they were all really enthusiastic about the film, so we said, look, I've not got any money for you guys, or your record companies. You just give us stuff. You know? And, they did, like, you know, kind of Underworld, Carl Heinerl and Darren Emerson, they kind of just gave us tracks, basically. And the Underworld track became kind of massive kind of hit, and you know, and Iggy Pop was kind of revitalised. Basically, we got in touch with him, and Danny Boyle said to him, if you give us a track, I'll direct a video for you. So he directed a video for Iggy. So we're doing all these, basically trading favours to get these tunes. And we had a bit of, you know, that was the most contested thing about it, was, you know, the real arguments were about what would go on. We actually ended up getting more stuff than we could use, and the biggest arguments were really about what would go into the film, the soundtrack. But the soundtrack did become very iconic, and a lot of that was due to Danny's judgment, because I could see all the stuff, the contemporary stuff, you know, like Iggy and sort of Lou Reed and all that from the, and I could also see the, you know, working, I could also see the dance music, the house music working, because there's no lyrics in it, it just, you know, it just pounds along, or very, very little lyrics. What I couldn't see working was all the kind of Britpop stuff, you know, the Flowers in the Pulp and the Elasticas and all that, but I mean, that was really Danny and John to a lesser extent. They thought, no, we have to make it feel almost like a kind of contemporary 90s film as well, you know, let's say something about the times. And it worked perfectly. It worked perfectly because basically that was the last time that Britain had a vibrant youth culture. Everything went global and stuff like that. It went right around, you know, it went so the, you know, the youth culture we had from Teds to Mods to Punks to Acid House to Casuals, all that was gone basically. And, you know, the 90s was a sort of was the last stand of that. It was like it was a celebration of British youth culture, but there was also a kind of requiem mass for the end of it. You know,
Well,
so
you know, having
captured that.
interviewed Damon and Justine and Jarvis, you can kind of picture them hanging out with the crew in Trainspotting.
Yeah, I mean they were great. They were all incredibly enthusiastic about it, and they just spread a kind of word of mouth through the kind of cognoscenti in sort of London at the time, and it gave it a tremendous buzz. It gave the whole movie a tremendous buzz.
We want to get the movie going here because we know people got to work tomorrow, but you know, we don't get Irvine, you know, in the house that often. So a couple more questions real quick. You know, it's interesting, the movie